Hi all and welcome to my next video, Process of Auditing Information Systems, Domain 1. This is Susan Paul, CISSP CISA. I know I'm coming back after a long break. I'm really sorry. I was very busy with auditing in my company. So let's just dive ahead into Domain 1. So if you see the way the CRM is drafted for this is first they kind of walk us through how to perform an audit and then like why an audit is performed and what are the different types of risk and how we can assess it in an organization and so on and so forth. So this is a very important topic for the CISA examination. Please bear in mind that most of the questions, I would say more than 50% questions come from this particular domain. For this particular domain, I think it will be really valuable if you'll read the CRM. However, just like me and a lot of others, if we don't have the time, then please go ahead and approach your database questions. That is the question that is sold by ISACA. If you can attempt that, again and again till you score around 100%, then it's something worth it as well. I hope my video really helps you understand this domain. So let's start off with the steps to perform an audit. Just like anything, so I'm gonna, more than talking how it comes in the book, I'm gonna give it to you with a live example. So let's say you've been recruited as an internal auditor with a publicly traded company. So you will have quite a lot of compliance regulations like SOX and other things, and you will be a person who will test this internally and then let external audit know that you're testing or that you have tested and you're comfortable or whether the particular control is efficient or not, right? So you will test your environment, you'll see that everything is going on fine, you let external audit know, external audit might do their test as well. But as an internal auditor, you will be the one point of contact for your company to say that everything is fine. Okay. So now put yourself into those shoes and think, if you're going to perform an audit on, let's say, XYZ company, right? So what do you first need to perform this audit? First, you need to understand what the business is. What does XYZ do? Let's say XYZ is some top beverage company. So then you got to understand what kind of beverages they do, what is their business, what is their vision, what is their mission, what are they looking to become in the following years, right? How are they financially placed, and what is it that the company is trying to achieve, and where they are, right? So once you have got an understanding of the business, then the second thing you do is, what I would say is, go ahead and look at the previous year work papers to see how the audit was done last year, whether there were any findings, whether anybody found anything that was not effective, whether there were any deficiencies, that's how we call it, was found. You note that, and then you see whether there was any substantial change in the business. Let's say XYZ company bought over another smaller company called ABC, right? So you see that this company now has merged into XYZ, and so XYZ's auditing scope itself changes. So you got to look at that. So coming to audit scope and objectives, then you take the audit scope, what and all is in scope for this audit, what is not in scope for this audit. So normally for SOX testing, we'll be looking at all the financial systems, everything that goes while the finance side is looked will be all the applications or technologies, people, resources, everything will be in scope for the audit. And what is the objective of the audit? Normally the objective of the audit is to reduce risk, but I don't want to go down that path because we have different types of objectives for the audit as we go through this chapter. Then how are you going to approach this audit? What are the different audit approaches you're going to have? You're going to have in-person interviews. What is it that you're going to do? And what is it as an audit team you're going to do? Will be what the audit approach is, and what is the strategy, how you are going to go ahead and perform this audit, how long will it take, what is the timeline, who are the people who are necessary for this, what are the different teams that are going to be involved, what are the different how do we call it, evidence you're going to look at. Everything comes under audit approach and strategy. So now going ahead, if you see in your book, the next thing we should talk about is the ISACA Code of Ethics. I know it's mentioned in the CRM that this does not have to be memorized, but I would just say look at it because one or two questions might come from the ISACA Code of Ethics. It just says that the general understanding of the Code of Ethics is that you'll perform your duty diligently, and you will be a person where you give your individual judgment and nobody else clouds you. Also, that you won't go ahead and be part of things like sales and try to sell stuff and make the business come up and all that. You're going to be this separate individual entity who's auditing for the company, and your report should be completely unbiased, right? It should be completely on your own. So even if you see a big deficiency, you have a finding, then it's a finding. Just because you work for the company, your opinion shouldn't be clouded. Okay, so that's basically what the code of ethics talks about. But I'll definitely tell you to please go look at page 35 of the CRM, where they talk about the ISACA code of ethics, and it's a must for the exam. Now, the next thing I think, which they basically very, they go on stating this again and again in your ISACA CRM, is the standards and guidelines. So the way I understand it, guidelines is, kind of a kind of a step-by-step process. It is the I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought here. So, guidelines is a step by step process and it's not mandatory, whereas a standard is mandatory and something that has to be followed. So, that's the only main difference I see between standards and guidelines. So, if you see, even in your book, that's what they normally say. They kind of point out saying that, if you're into the assurance guidelines, kind of, then you can just use your professional judgment and so on and so forth. If it's a standard, then it's something that has to be followed. So next, my very favorite topic, risk assessment. So if you see, in risk assessment, you have internal controls, control objectives, general controls, and specific controls. Now again, I'm going to go back to the SOX example. Me being an internal auditor myself, I can relate to this very closely. So if you go to see, normally in companies we have a set of control objectives. So let me take a step back. So first, what we do is, for a particular SOX audit or any audit that is being conducted within the organization, we first see what are the risks that are there in our environment. Okay. So let's take the same example of ABC company. We're conducting a risk assessment to first see what are the different risks within the company. So again, going for a very basic example, let's say windows are broken, doors are open. This risk allows a theft to happen or things to be stolen from within the company. So in order to mitigate this risk, you put controls around your company. You kind of put a gate or fence, you have a guard, you have bollards to stop vehicles coming in, you even have a man trap, you have different things to stop this kind of theft to happen in your company. So what are those objectives that you've put is called controls. So in controls, you have what is called internal controls, general controls, specific controls. As the name itself goes, internal controls is internally for your company. General controls are controls that can be followed by everyone. It's just general, like you have a general framework like ISO 27001 controls. Those are all general, and then some specific controls might be only for that specific division that you're auditing, or the division that you're testing. So then you go ahead and kind of just audit that specific entity. A control objective is more like, so you've identified the risk and you've kind of put a control around it. The control objective will be a write-up about what that control has to do, or what you have to provide to say that control has met its obligation. Okay, like to make it in simple terms, now I say that that I don't have a door, right? So the risk there is that theft can happen. So I'm putting a control that I'm not only going to put a door, but I'm going to put a guard and I'm going to put a man trap, right? So that nobody can enter the place. So for me to be compliant to this control, I have to show evidence that I have everything that I'm saying that I have. Okay, based on the severity of what's of my organization, I have to tell that I have everything of what is here, right? So moving on, so you have different types of audits. So we have compliance audit, and then we have financial audit, operational audit, administrative audit, IS audit, specialized audit, and forensic audit. So this is all as the name goes. As I just said, a compliance audit, is with regards to compliance framework. So nowadays we have like SOX. I don't know if you all have heard about PCI, which is payment card industry. These are all compliance regulations, and the audit that happens is to just say that the company is compliant to these particular regulations. So I hope I didn't lose you here. The financial audit, per se, if you go to look at that, that's more on the things of your finance. So I'll say SOX is on the fence, because SOX, we have a finance audit as well, and we have the compliance IT side as well. So it's something like that. A financial audit is something that, where they audit against your balance sheet or anything that happens in your finance side. An operational audit is more like, if you go ahead to see what's going on within your organization. Like for example, let's take like, you have contractors or third party vendors within your organization, and you're going to conduct an audit to see whether there's any risk which is posed by them. Then that's an operational audit. An administrative audit, I from my understanding, is more like, more administrative. You're checking all the paperwork within the organization, everything has been filed, right, everything has been done. An IS audit, I think it's information systems, what they're calling IS here. So that's just basically they're checking on the systems, everything is compliant. I would even say that data loss prevention and things like that, when you're going more into the system portion of it, your asset security, that you're looking into your assets, everything comes within that audit. A specialized audit will be when you're specializing to one particular, process, project team. You're conducting an audit to just see, like, when I was with one company, I don't want to name it, we used to conduct audits for particular applications we use within a particular team, which I felt was rather funny at that time. But now thinking about it, that can be classified as specialized audit. Let's say that you're using a Dell laptop, and you're going to, Dell being the company which is vendoring to you, you're going to do a specialized audit just on the laptops that Dell has. I consider that you can take it that way. A forensic audit, this is, something of great importance. So if you go to see a forensics per se, the way I see it is like, a fingerprinting and things like that, where they go ahead and take evidence, to for further, if there's any action or court of law, then they can show this, and they'll be able to say that that they have all this evidence to show that the company is not legally liable for anything. So if you see, a forensic audit per se is conducted to reduce fraud or any financial claims that goes towards the audit, towards the company, I'm sorry. And this is something that can be shown as evidence in the court of law. So basically that. So you can think about your CSI and your Law and Order kind of serials, where they show all this forensics evidence is taken and things like that. That's kind of a forensic audit. That's the easy way to remember it. So moving on. So I'm going to now take a little important chapter, which is compliance versus substantiative testing. And if you go to see, there are only some few major points that you have to remember in this particular compliance versus substantiative testing. So before I move on there, I'll just tell you the way I understand compliance versus substantiative testing based on my experience. So when you have a SOX audit, okay, or any audit for that matter, you're a compliance audit, when you are trying to say that the company is compliant to some certain law or regulation, it's a compliance audit. Now, let's say your company failed that compliance audit, right? And the company is not compliant to that particular law or regulation at all. Then you do more substantiative testing that is over and above the compliance audit to show that, you do a very detailed testing to see what's going on wrong over there. That's the way normally we do it. The important points that you can remember in this is that always compliance testing will be performed first. Substantiative testing will be the second step. And then compliance testing tests more of the control, the way I told you, like in SOX control. Compliance testing will be to just see that the control is effective or ineffective. A substantiative testing will go into details. They'll really go in and check like what's going on. In substantiative testing, I'll call it more as an integrity checking. They're going really inside, they're going deep into the control, they're going to see each and every step, they're going to sit with the process, they're going to go through the application, they're going to go through everything to see whether it works. And then one more thing that is important to note here is that that if you come across a word attribute sampling, then that's more focused towards compliance testing and not substantiated testing. Again, remember, substantiated integrity is very detailed testing of things that fail in the compliance testing. I hope I said it right. Substantiative testing is a very detailed testing of things that fail in the compliance testing. If you remember that, you're good. All right. Okay. Performing an IS audit. So if you go to see, I kind of just put performing an IS audit, but if you go to see, this is just everything that is within this particular chapter. So let me move on. So risk-based auditing. So as I just told you, if you see risk-based auditing for SOX itself, or for any audit, let it be operational, SOX, financial, just what we saw before, right? All these type of audits, everything that you see here, compliance, financial, operation, it should be all conducted to mitigate a risk, or at least you're trying to go ahead and identify your risk, and these controls that you're putting in place are to close the gap of some risk, right? So to me, that's how it is. Otherwise, I don't know what we're auditing against, right? So that is what is risk-based auditing. You kind of do a risk assessment, you see where your risks are, and then you put controls around that, and then you do your auditing based on the risk that is in your environment. We have different types of audit risk. One is inherent. So inherent, like the name goes, inherent is what's already there. So let's say you're this new auditor, you're coming to my company ABC, and you're going to conduct an audit, and you found 100 findings. As I said, my doors are open, my windows are broken, I don't have guards, people are just taking the beverages away, my secret formula is lost, everything is a finding. But that is what I have as is, right? You came, you saw, you told me. Now, residual means you came, you saw, you told me. Out of this, I decided that I'll take all the physical security stuff, like I'm going to close my door, I'm going to fix my windows and things like that. And then you conduct an audit again, and you see that the following risk which remains after me doing all the controls is called residual risk. Now, moving on to control risk. Control risk is a misstatement which could occur but may not be detected and corrected or prevented by an entity's internal control mechanism. All right. So any misstatement which is not found out by the internal audit team, or any internal audit, I'll call it internal audit team, is called a control risk. A detection risk is when the auditor fails to find a material misstatement. So there's a financial statement, the auditor didn't see that instead of 1,000 they put 100,000, then it is a detection risk. The overall audit risk is inherent risk into control risk into detection risk will be your overall audit risk. Now, how do you treat risk? So there are different ways you treat risk. One is by mitigating the risk. So mitigation means, like as I said, my door is broken, I'm willing to work with you on that, and I'm saying that okay, I will go ahead and mitigate it. I will take action. That is mitigation. Acceptance is I'm accepting the risk. You're telling me, but I've done a cost benefit analysis and the cost is too much. It's much more than what the risk has. So you're telling me that how should I put it? So I'm having a building, and my building, again, the doors and windows are open, but you're telling me that I need this supernova security system where, I can only enter the building with my fingerprint and, or retina eye scan. But when I do the cost for that, all that's, suggestion which is given by you, it's much more even than what my business cost, right? So at that point, I'm saying, okay, I'm going to fix my door, but I can't do all that. So I'm just accepting the risk. Yes, I know that anybody can enter. They can break the door and enter. I know that, and I'm accepting that. But at this point, I can't go ahead and put any other controls over there. Transfer risk. For transfer, I think I said this before somewhere, but transfer risk is always when you outsource or you take insurance. So you're taking an insurance for your building, for like your building costs 100,000 and you're taking insurance for the same 100,000. You've transferred the risk over to the insurance company. So if anything happens to your building, the insurance company will pay. Just like how we have cars here in the US and we have our insurance towards that. Avoidance is when you absolutely, tend to avoid the risk. You're like, okay, I don't care. I'm fine. I'm not doing anything about it. So I'm avoiding. Yeah. Next is fraud detection. Fraud detection, I think this whole process is happening to detect fraud. So again, it all goes to say that that independence of the auditor should be there in terms to go ahead and detect this different frauds that happen within the organization. So it's important as an auditor for you to go ahead and see and detect the fraudulent activities or places where we think that a fraudulent activity can happen, where there's no segregation of duties and things like that, where the same person is the person who writes a check, deposits a check, withdraws the check. Those are all that leads can lead to fraud in the future. So that's where we're talking about fraud detection. So if you see in the book itself, they've mentioned like when management is primarily responsible for everything, so there's a chance that they'll exploit it and they'll go ahead and they'll be like, yeah, that's fine, I can go ahead and do this because nobody's going to find out. Those are all fraud detection. We have to see that. I just added findings here because this was in another segment, but the main thing what I'm talking about findings is when you conduct an audit and you get some outcome, that is you get some deficiencies in that, where you're saying that there's a gap in the process, that's a finding. And normally for any audit, the findings will be communicated in the end to the company or to the persons who you're auditing, and they have a chance to accept or reject or tell you that if probably you looked at some process wrongly, then they can let you know and you can further check the evidence. It's always best to go back and see whether there was anything done that probably we missed to look at. So always remember, findings can be discussed, and but findings cannot be removed or adjusted, but findings can be discussed. So what are the different techniques to conduct? One is interviewing. So you just sit next to this person and you kind of see how they're doing. It's like what I call shadowing, right? What a lot of us have done. We kind of we observe the person, we see what they're doing, we see what's the actual function they're doing, we see where they're clicking. Normally, in a lot of audits, we have what's called the walkthrough audit, and in the walkthrough, this is what happens: a key member comes from the team, and he'll do his entire process from start to finish, and you can look how the system looks, how access is generated, and everything. So an interview and observing personnel will be that. So if you go to see sampling, in sampling we have what's called the statistical and non-statistical sampling. So here, if we see in statistical sampling, in statistical sampling, I think we have two more, which is I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought again. I'm looking at something here. Okay, statistical sampling is used when there's a probability of error must be objectively quantified, that is, no subjectivity involved. So this is what's written in the book. So if you see what statistical sampling means, is just numbers. You statistically, you're not going through judgment and all that. You perform some kind of mathematical calculations and you take a sample out of that. So that is statistical sampling. Non-statistical can be judgmental, which normally we do quite a lot. So there's 1,000 cases, you just decide that you'll take 20 cases and go ahead with it. So that's non-statistical sampling. Attribute sampling is closely related to compliance testing, as I said before. And substantiative testing goes with variable sampling because it's a detailed sample. The best sampling technique for fraud is discovery sampling. So that is again closely linked with forensics, if you see. And if we go further, if you see the confidence coefficient, a higher confidence coefficient will result in use of a larger sample size, and a smaller confidence coefficient will be a smaller sample size. Now, I know one of my friends when studying for this, she was very confused with this. She said, why higher confidence, higher sample size? Because the higher the confidence, you want 99%, then you want your quality to be 99% or 99.99%, means you'll check everything for it to be fine, right? But if you're saying that, no, I'm okay, I'm fine with 50%, then that 50% is not checked is fine with you. So higher, lower confidence coefficient, right? Then if you go further to see, let me just check another thing. So if you go further to see, there are certain, if you, in the exam, you will, not only in the exam, but as the risk assessment thing itself, you will see that, there's a lot of write-up about Corbett 5 and COSO and all these kind of things. So don't worry about it. I didn't see any questions around that. I will not bother a lot about that. But normally, in a lot of organizations, even in my organization, we use the COSO framework more than COBIT 5. We use that framework, but it's just nice to have a general reading about it, and get yourself acclimated to what the COSO and COBIT framework are. But just out of my understanding, I didn't see any questions in that. So when we go to stratified mean per unit, a statistical plan in which the population is divided into strata and samples are drawn from the strata. So for all of y'all are asking me what is a strata, what is a strata? If you see, I think strata is kind of like a population. Hold on one second. So I think, yeah, so strata is kind of like a population sample which they take. So that's what is stratified mean per unit. And if you go for, yes, one second, I'm just checking this. So stratification properly applied reduces the sample size relating to unstratified mean per unit. Now there is a good example which is given in the CISA exam community itself, where a lot of people have asked this question, and where people have said that, so I'm going to read you what I read about this particular thing. So a person is given that difference estimation is used to predict the whole population. Audited values is equal to book value plus error or deviation. Is used when the sizes of misstatement do not greatly or significantly in comparison to the book value. So this makes no sense to me. Okay. So what they're given is, okay, hold on, this is good. So to adequately represent a minority, you use stratified mean per unit, right? Where the strata is a fraction of that right percentage of sample. I think I got it now. So normally in sampling, how do you take the right percentage? I'll tell you of one major problem I had in one of the companies. So I was, part of the quality control team. And at that point of time, the records that were processed by the team were around 10,000 or something. And we were asked to check like, I don't know, 1% of that sample. So it should have been like 100 records which we were checking. But the problem is in the sample that we were checking, we were not able to get a true representation of the population. We were not able to find major errors in that particular sample that we were testing. We were, getting some small things, but that's not what business wanted. So at that point of time, even I, was shooting arrows in the dark, where I was like, okay, now what kind of scenario? But if you go to see, if we had taken a true representation of the population, we would have been able to find those particular errors that were causing an issue to business. So I think that's what they're coming to say in this whole stratified mean per unit, unstratified mean per unit, and difference estimation. So CAT, which is continuous assisted audit techniques. So if you see, the way I understand this is that, it's continuous auditing. Okay, one second. I saw for control self-assessment, but I'm just pulling up my notes for this. Give me 1 second. I'm sorry for the break. In the meantime, in continuous, as I'm looking at this, in the continuous auditing technique, there's the way I understand it is that it's continuously when the technology itself audits the particular, the particular risk, and there's no this set deadline, like it's in 6 months or in 1 year or whatever. So if you see, for an auditor, these are like tools where they gather the information, and it is not gathered only during half yearly or the full year time, but it is gathered on a regular basis, and the audit also happens regularly, so that if there's any problem, you'll be able to see it and sort it right there and then. Yeah, that's the same thing written in the book as well. So right there and then. So if you see, like in my previous organization, we were actually looking for a tool which will capture all the audit evidence and kind of, go through it and put a trigger as and when there's an issue with the evidence that is found. So I think that is like a key, right? So that the audit happens by itself, it happens by technology, and it happens regularly, so that we don't wait for the half interim or the roll forward audit to pinpoint your issues. So to me, that is continuous assisted audit techniques. Okay, next important chapter is the control self assessment. So if you go to see for control self assessment, the way I understand that is that the team has more an important role to play. So it first of all it concentrates on high risk and to enhance control monitoring by the functional staff. So it is that the team, as I was saying, has a more very important role to play, and the auditor should be kind of like a facilitator in this control self assessment, because I'm self assessing myself. I'm looking at myself and saying, okay, this is my problem, this is my problem, this is my problem. So as an auditor, you facilitate and say, yes, that's fine, go ahead in this way or go ahead in that way, right? uh, so the important thing for a control self assessment is that the team should be involved, that line management should be involved. And definitely, control self assessment enhances audit and does not, but remember, it does not replace audit. Just because I'm self assessing myself and saying, yeah, this is okay, that is okay, that doesn't mean that I can't have an auditor come and audit me. That has to happen. But it just is that, the business itself has come to that mindset where they are ready to accept that this is our issue, which is a big thing. I've worked for companies where people are just not ready to accept that there's an issue. So it's good that when a control self assessment happens, that the business is ready to accept the issue and work with the auditor towards that. So I think that's most of it what I have for domain 1. These were the major important points that I saw, which I've covered. There's a lot of other things which have been mentioned in the CRM, which is not that much important, but like for instance, what I'll say, like as I said, the Corbett Corso framework, and then your audit documentation, which is the findings, and then they go on to talk about the benefits of control self assessment, and then continuous auditing, and so on and so forth. These are things you can look at. The major things that I will say which is important from domain 1 are risk assessment, types of risk, compliance and substantiative testing, control self assessment, sampling, and then that differences between inherent residual risk, and then detection risk, and all that. That's very important. And then I think that is the major things that you have to remember in domain 1. And as usual, if any questions, please contact me at susygirl5@gmail.com. And thank you so much. I've got various requests in the last 1 month to do this video, and I'm very sorry for the delay. And if you like my video, please like and subscribe, and please let me know if there's any other topics you would like me to cover in domain 1. I'm actually training for the C risk right now, and so I'm getting a lot into the risk management domain currently. So any questions for risk management, please let me know, and I can definitely make another video. I can email you personally and try to help you out. Thank you so much.